Today's conversation with Dr. Andrew Livingston is an eye-opening one. We cover how to afford life while treating elite level athletes in the outpatient setting. Andrew has done an awesome job of getting a very high level education and then getting out and trying to figure out and navigating the waters of how to pay off that education, living the lifestyle he wants to lead, and achieving the financial goals he set out for himself, all while treating the population that he's dying to treat. And he will talk very specifically about how he managed those things and then how he chose to grow within the company to take on more responsibility, to expand his earning power, and ultimately his job satisfaction. There's a lot of nuggets in here that are super worthwhile and I think is just great to hear from a vet like Andrew Livingston and super applicable to physical therapists of all levels, of all styles. And the truth is, any graduate from any high-level graduate program needs to understand the economics of what it takes to go into their desired field and to achieve at a very high level. Andrew's going to help us out with that. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Dr. Andrew Livingston. Dr. Livingston is a graduate of Lebanon Valley College, both undergraduate and their doctorate of physical therapy program. He played defensive end there for close to 5 years. We dig into that. He then moved on to a sports residency at St. Francis University in Pennsylvania, and then he completed his SCS certification. He joined True Sports Physical Therapy right around 2019 as a staff sports physical therapist, and now has grown all the way up to a regional director, overseeing clinics in Bel Air, Maryland, York, Pennsylvania, and Lebanon, Pennsylvania, with plenty more to come. A lot to learn from Dr. Andrew Livingston. Want to thank him for his time and thank you guys for listening. This show is growing by leaps and bounds. We're always excited to hear from you, so please leave us a review wherever you're listening to pods. Shoot me an email, Yoni, Y-O-N-I, at truesportspt.com. A lot of our topics are designed based upon the feedback that I get via email or direct message on Instagram, truesportspt. Find us, hit us up, give us show ideas, give us feedback, tell us how we can get better at this so we can better serve you, the sports physical therapist. You're going to love this conversation with Andrew Livingston. Welcome back to the True Sports Physical Therapy Podcast. I got Dr. Andrew Livingston here with us. Welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Liv, there's so much I want to cover with you. And even just in our prep for the show, there's so much I've already learned from you, both about the field of physical therapy as well as you specifically. So I can't wait for you to share some of this with our listeners, to the thousands of sports physical therapists across the country and really across the world. Shout out to our Israeli listeners. Let's start with a massive problem within the field of physical therapy that it seems like you've really figured out. And I think the way you have tried to figure this out and have figured it out is going to be enlightening to all of our listeners. So here's the problem I see with the PT profession, that the entire thing is upside down. You pay a tremendous amount of money to get your doctorate degree. You come out of graduate school, and I don't understand how we are expected to pay off our loans or really just make enough money to support a given lifestyle. It's just not straightforward. And that's why I think the whole thing is upside down. Now, I was lucky enough to interview you for your first role here at True Sports, and since that point, you've kind of figured that equation out. So talk to me about how you solved for how much you can earn versus how much you seemingly owe to get this degree.
Yeah, so like you said, the whole thing is pretty backwards in what is expected of us. So I don't know if I figured it out, but there's a bunch of different strategies you can use to figure out what the game plan is going to be for paying back loans. Really, the two main strategies that most people work on right now are either living at home, keeping your expenses to zero, and then putting everything you have into those loans to pay them down as fast as you can. That's not realistic for everybody. The other end of it is push all those payments off as long as you can and take out refinance to get longer payment time frames, but lower out of pocket in the now. For me, I think early on I tried to do the first, so I tried to really live minimalistically, and
You did that amazingly. Give me an example of you living minimalistically. If that's a word.
So this was in residency. I was making $32K. I was living in Crescent, Pennsylvania. Rent for a 1-bedroom apartment was $450 a month. Different time. Wasn't a great town. Wasn't the worst. Anyway, I knew I was getting paid. I had to also pay at that point one of my private loans back, because private loans didn't care if you were in residency or not. You couldn't defer it, at least that one at the time. And a big piece of me living as best I could was keeping shopping to the minimum. Groceries, shopped at Aldi. Shout out Aldi. I need to get a sponsorship.
Big sponsor. They're a big sponsor of the program. Thank you, Aldi.
And I didn't do anything. I mean, at the same time, with residency, you're working 60 hours a week anyway, and then doing stuff on the weekends too. So there wasn't time for me to actually spend a whole lot of money anyway. And at that point too, I didn't have a whole lot of knowledge on finances really at all. So that was also when I started learning a lot, different podcasts, and really through the internet on how to manage money at that point, how to plan for the future, how to take advantage of the money that you did have, make it work for you, and try to figure out the big ways to get ahead at that stage in my life.
So, okay, let's take even a step back further to that, because obviously you were figuring that out with residency. You go to LVC. You thought you wanted to be a PT, but didn't get into a program right out of college.
Correct.
Right? You
Correct.
get to LVC to play football.
Yep.
Lebanon Valley.
Mm-hmm.
Division III Dutchman.
Flying Dutchman.
Flying Dutchman. Everyone knows that. And so while you're there, you're a crim major, and then walk me through what happens there, because I think that's an important beginning.
Yeah, I went in, didn't get accepted to any programs, so I went to play football really and try to figure out what I wanted to do at that point. Everyone on the team was a criminal justice major, so I figured I would just join that.
Okay, but Liv, you're a smart ass dude. You went to residency. You're in SCS. How is it possible you didn't get into a program out of college? Or sorry, out of high school?
I was in a smaller high school. I wasn't top of my class. I was probably 25th. Other than that, I didn't know. I had observation
hours. How
hours.
small is this high school? 30 people?
250 in my class.
Okay, so not bad.
So not huge, but not small.
Yeah.
I don't know. I had observation hours. I don't know why I really didn't get accepted. My SATs weren't super high. Back then, everyone really relied on SATs before COVID kind of kicked that out. So I don't know. But anyway, I didn't get in, so didn't know what to do. Just went to school to play football and figured it out at some point. During my freshman year, I realized this wasn't what I wanted to do at all, and I didn't want to go through college not knowing that I didn't try to at least get into PT school in the back end. So I switched to biology major because it was the most closely matched the prerequisites for PT school, and that was honestly harder than PT school itself at that point.
What was your backup plan? You come out with a bio degree, you don't get into grad school. What are you thinking?
I don't know if I had one. I don't know if I had
XFL.
a Definitely wasn't that.
Definitely not the XFL.
Definitely wasn't that.
Okay, so bio major, things start going well. You're like, hey, maybe I'll be able to get into LVC. Are you thinking at that point?
No, because my GPA wasn't high enough. So my GPA at the time was like a 3.4, and most PT programs wanted a 3.6 or a 3.8 to even apply. Ended up applying to a few anyway. I got two acceptances. One was a new program, so it was kind of risky. The other wanted me to take a anatomy class in the summer, which was about $2,500. I didn't want to do that. And then LVC took a chance on me somehow, and I was one of the 3 grad transfers that came into the program. And they based that off how many people they lose through their first undergrad portion of that program.
So they've already accepted a certain amount. If someone falls out, then they're like, okay.
Correct. We have room for 2 more, 3 more. There was 1 year they didn't take any more because not enough people failed out. That was what happened at that point.
There has to be some secret there or something that you did. Like, what advice would you give? There's so many people on that bubble. How do you push yourself to the front of that line?
I think just make as many connections as you can.
So, who was that by name, but who was that by role that you were trying to connect with?
when I was first there and I wanted to switch to biology, I wanted to switch to exercise science. You weren't allowed to, fun fact, at the time, because it was reserved for PT students only. So I talked to a lot of the faculty at that point. So they knew who I was. They knew what I was trying to do. I think that helped because they knew I was a motivated person 3 years later trying to get into the same program. I had recommendation letters from a lot of different people. A couple mentors that were PTs at the time too that came from LVC. That helped. I had 1 year of eligibility left. I somehow had a decent junior year, redshirt junior year, so I had another year to play. My coach maybe pulled some strings for me too. All those things I think led to me having an opportunity to get into LVC's program at that point.
So you played football your first year in grad school?
Yeah. Yep.
How the hell did you manage anatomy?
Well, anatomy was in the summer, so I had the anatomy class before all that started.
Okay.
But the semester itself was 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. was in class and lecture, and then from 3:30 till 6 was in practice, and then went home and ate and studied and did it all again the next day.
Which is a joke compared to what you do now. So that must have been really easy. Okay, so you beg, borrow, and steal your way into graduate school at LVC.
That's a good way to put it.
But it worked. And your advice there, just to sum that up, is you started networking. From a really early young age. You realized it's not what I know, it's who I know, and you started just trying to know people, and you happen to be really good at that. That gets you into LVC. At what point do you realize, how am I going to pay this off? Or did that not cross your mind?
So coming through high school and even into college, everyone was very much like, oh yeah, you'll pay it off later. Like, don't worry about it now. Everyone does this. They pay it off later. I didn't really understand it until I was taking out grad school loans on top of the loans that I already had. And at this point I had a little more wherewithal from being 17 to being, 21 of, wow, that's $35,000 every single year now that I'm pulling out at a 6.5% interest rate. And, oh, yeah, I had a $75,000 loan from 4 years ago that had a 6% interest rate that I haven't touched, too. Not to mention, but didn't realize that the government also had, when they say you have, federal student loans, those are loans, too. And so that didn't really cross my mind until I was in grad school either. So while I'm in grad school, I'm considering all these things as I'm paying rent and working at the same time and coaching and playing football. And a lot of these things are going on, trying to figure out how to start getting ready for those bills to hit. 'Cause I knew at some point it was going to come.
Yeah, but then you make an insane decision to make $32,000 a year doing residency.
Yeah.
So I guess my question around that was, what the hell were you thinking? How's that is that a good question?
That's a great question.
What were you thinking?
Really open-ended. Yeah, I knew my passion for wanting to be in sports was stronger at that point than it was for the thought of paying off those student loans, for better, for worse.
Okay.
And I knew where I was in my career at that point. I didn't have what I needed to do that well. And so residency for me was kind of the only, in my mind at the time, the only answer for me, or else I'd be stuck in a mill that I didn't want to be in with no way to separate myself from, Tom, Dick, or Harry.
Did anyone try to dissuade you from residency?
Yes. I had a lot of people wanting just to get me into a job. Connections that were around me just wanted to get me into a job, which I appreciated, but didn't have passion for. I was the only one in my class that did residency, I believe, coming out. So it was very like me talking to a couple mentors on what the heck do I do next, and how do I apply, like, what is this?
Yeah.
That was kind of where I was.
Okay, so far, you've only spelled out the worst case or the best example of how upside down the system is.
Yeah.
Because you just keep accruing debt, right? 32 grand you're paying for 32 grand you're making in residency. You're paying $450 in rent. You're living real slim. What the hell is your plan then?
Yeah.
How do you get out?
So my plan at that point, I wanted to obviously get a job in sports. I had a couple offers. The best fit and honestly the best offer was here at True Sports. So that made the most sense to me. I was really passionate about that opportunity and was a really good fit. So that's where I kind of started with, well, now I just doubled my income. This is luxury now. So then it was like, what the hell do I do with all this quote unquote extra money? that I wasn't living with before.
Gotcha. What are you doing with the loans at that point?
So all but one loans were in deferment, because when you get a residency, you can go into deferment. My one provider didn't care, and they wanted their payments anyway. At that point, all of my loans turned on, activated to start repayment. And I was paying at the time, probably as I started here, probably $1,500 to $1,700 a month in
And that's
student loan payments.
And what's the length of that loan?
And those, I mean, that one was 15. The others were 20-year loans.
So you're looking at about 20 years of paying, let's call it $1,500 a month.
Yep.
And your thought process then is to do what?
My thought process then was to throw as much money at that as possible to either A, shorten that 20 years to maybe 15. But also another point that I didn't mention is I wanted to refinance to get lower interest rates.
Yep.
The messed up part is they look at your debt to income ratio, and every answer that I kept getting was your debt to income ratio is too high. So you don't make enough money to get a better interest rate to get yourself out of a financial situation, even though you're making your payments and you're trying to do what's financially responsible and right.
So they see the future. They see the title of this podcast, that the entire thing is upside down. The entire ratio is upside down. They're saying we're not going to support that. What do you think their rationale is on that?
Who's they?
They being the banks that wouldn't consolidate.
I mean, it's risky. If I'm looking as a bank perspective, it's riskier, right? I mean, all this debt, how am I going to make these payments? This guy might not actually pay his loans. Why would we give him an easier time? I think, which it sounds backwards. It sounds kind of crooked, but
yeah.
If I look at it from a financial standpoint, I guess that makes some sort of sense.
It must. The banks are never wrong.
They're never wrong.
They would never
they're
make
the
a
reason
mistake.
the world turns.
Yes. So, okay. So you cannot consolidate. You're making 75. You owe
roughly 280 at the time.
280. You're paying $1,500 a month. You're paying $1,800 a month for the foreseeable future. What's your game plan? Were you okay kind of going to sleep at night knowing that this was the arrangement?
It wasn't so much that I was okay. That was the reality. There's no escaping that. You can go buy a car you can't afford. You can buy a house you can't afford, and you can go bankrupt. And yeah, it ruins your credit for 5-10 years, but you can get rid of that. You can't, unless you die, your student loans are with you. So for me, my plan was, all right, I'm going to hustle, make as much money as I can, pay these down to where my debt to income ratio is manageable, refinance, gives me more flexibility to have different strategies, and go from there.
What was that number that you had to get to?
I don't know. Every 3 or 4 months, I would try again. I would dump. And so that was what I had to pay. That's 15 to 17. That was what I had to pay. I'd do Rover on the weekends. I would do random stuff. I'd watch people's dogs and houses. I would dump probably another couple hundred every paycheck trying to get that number down.
Tell me what Rover is.
Rover is where it's an online service that you watch people's dogs or animals or whatever they have.
My wife had a dog at this point, and I remember thinking in my head, what if I just get Liv to take care of this stupid-ass dog and just bake it into your salary?
I would have done it.
I know you would have done it, sicko. Okay, so you're hustling like crazy, adding on to that $1,800. Then what happens?
So then I was able to finally refinance these loans, and so at that point they were 6.5%, 7%, a lot of them, and I was able to spin them down into. I got lucky when I was refinancing. The market was really good. They were able to give me 3%, 3.5% interest rates, which still it's an interest rate, but was half of what I was paying before. So at least it slows the bleeding on the return. The payments that you're making to the principal versus the interest.
Yep. And then do you keep contributing at the same amount?
Yeah, I kept contributing the same amount, knowing that I can always make it less and lengthen it if I needed to. But I didn't have any obligations at the time, and so I knew I wanted to pay down as much of that as possible.
Yep.
My philosophy on that is changing a little bit now as I learn more about passive income and time and compounding interest and things that I want to take interest in. So, but the nice part is because I put that work in 4 or 5 years ago, I can have more flexibility to do things now that I couldn't then. As much as I complain about having to make payments now, at any point I can switch to making a lesser payment, take it out to a longer interest rate, have more cash flow on hand to do different things with that. So if I didn't do that earlier, I wouldn't have the flexibility to do that now.
Okay, so that makes sense. Let's get a little bit more granular because I
Mhm.
went through this one time. Yeah, one time with my student stuff. When you say, "Hey, I would try however many months to consolidate my loans," what does that mean? What does that look like? Who are you calling?
Rephrase that for me.
Okay, who are you calling to consolidate your loans?
I honestly was online. I was online with a bunch of different websites. So SoFi, Earnest were two really good ones. LendKey was a good one that helped me out early on. Those are the big three that I found really helpful early on. They were more flexible with PTs. They worked a lot of PTs.
Hmm. And you just found them Google searching.
I've actually found them through, I can't remember the name. There was this guy that came into PT school and he was helping with this problem.
Cool.
That's gonna kill me. I can't remember what it's called. He's expanded that business now, and he's doing really well, from my understand. His name's Joe something.
Find it in the show notes, Joe. We'll
Right.
put it in the show notes.
And he did his wife was a PT. The story was his wife was a PT, had the same issue.
Yeah.
He had connections with all these lenders that were quote unquote PT friendly. They gave more lenient interest rates on different things. So I found those lenders through his website and his services at the time, which were free at the time. I think he might charge a little bit now for them, but it's still pretty low monthly payment for what you're
And
paying
he
for.
or someone like him can guide you kind of through this process and has the hookup on the other side.
Correct.
And maybe he's just like the middleman. Okay, so you find that now you're working here, and then you're thinking in your head, what's the 5-year financial plan here for you?
It was to make as much money as I could in a sustainable way.
Mhm.
Whether that was at the time, I didn't think about it, but moving up the ladder from a corporate standpoint, it wasn't on my mind, but that's the route I ended up taking. I was also prepared to treat like crazy because I knew that's also part of our model too. Is
Yeah.
if you want to treat, you'll get reimbursed for the time that you spend on that. And so there was a point in my career where I just treated like crazy, and I loved it. I love what I do, so it made that easier. I was ready to do either or both of those things to make that happen.
Okay, so that's unique. Did you compare it to, should I get a part-time job?
That was a very short time I looked at doing home health, like leaving here on my hours that I was out and just
Mhm.
doing home health. I hated the thought of that. It's good for some people. Some people do it and they do a great job of getting extra income from doing that. I just couldn't do it with where I was at mentally. And
Did you ever think of, was there ever a crossroads where you were saying, with an outpatient salary, I'm not going to be able to make a dent in these loans.
oh yeah,
Let me go home health or something like that.
yes, I thought about that, but then I thought about how the residency would have been kind of at a loss for nothing. I would not have enjoyed what I do. I don't think I would be where I am now professionally. So for me, the thought was there, but I never wanted to pull the trigger on it because I figured I'd find a way out somehow, another way.
And what's interesting is you did find a way out. Definitely at that point in our trajectory or history, I guess, we didn't have a clear delineated growth structure, right?
No.
It's not like, okay, here's a ladder you can climb and here's what you're going to make and here's how you're going to be incentivized. We didn't have that. You were kind of just like, right man, right place, willing to do anything. I feel like, we had a clinic director leave and I called you and you're like, yep.
Yeah,
I'm like, yeah, but it's in a clinic. You're like, I don't care. So I think you just kind of saw the opportunity
Yeah.
and just kept jumping on it. So now describe where you are today, what you do, and essentially how you earn a living.
Yeah. So my current title is regional director. I have also sports physical therapist. That role is still important to me as well. I oversee facilities in our Bel Air office up in Northern Maryland, and then our clinics in Southern Pennsylvania as well. So York and Lebanon currently, and growing. What was the second part of your question?
Second part of my question is, how do you earn a living? Like, how
Yeah.
are you compensated? What's the structure?
The structure now is
Whoa, you should know
Yeah,
this.
no, I know. I'm trying to verbalize it in a way that is more concise. So I'm compensated now by improving the growth of our clinics and the efficiency of how we run things in the clinics that are in place now and the ones to come in the future.
Yep. Do you make a salary?
I do make a salary.
Okay,
I do
good.
make a salary.
Do you have a bonus structure?
I do have a bonus structure as well.
Okay. And then talk to me about medical, retirement, things like that.
Yeah, all the great things about obviously the bonus structure, and then vision, dental, health insurance, all that's included. PTO, which is awesome that we have in place now, that increases as you gain seniority in the company. Con Ed, which is fantastic. And then I know we're working on some different things in-house for Con Ed too. So there's a lot of pros with being where I am now.
Yeah, and my reason for highlighting that obviously is selfish because I'm very impressed by what True Sports does. But also, this is part of like an entire comp structure.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one that doesn't really have a cap on it, right? Like you have the ability to just keep earning and putting things under your umbrella appropriately. I like that because how else are you going to pay off or have a chance to really wrap your arms around this thing?
And that was a big piece of it too, is having the ability to expand that. There's only so many hours in a day.
Right.
So being able to do more with that time is what I'm banking on as we continue to grow, obviously.
Yeah, and just to spell that out a little bit further, no longer, like you've done a great job of putting you in a position where no longer are you just compensated by treating the patient in front of you by your 24 hours a day, but now you're able to be compensated for management, right? And so you earn more as your PTs earn more. And so based on the entire profitability of all of those clinics underneath you, you're able to just create more opportunities for wealth aggregation.
Correct.
Fancy way of saying
that's a
making
great
more
way
money.
to put that.
Yeah, thanks. Well, thanks for helping me design that type of plan. Now, what allowed you to have this growth mindset in trying to develop these roles with me? Because that's what transpired.
Yeah, I think a lot of it was just collaboration, right? It was the open expectation that we knew what we wanted to do, but how do we put it into a system that worked? And I think there was a period of a year or two where we had some growing pains with like, where do we take this thing, and how does it make sense for everybody involved? And I think we've gotten to a point where it works well. There was a lot of work that went into doing that. And there was a lot of trial and error.
Yep.
I think we hit a really good spot now with where we're at in terms of the structure of that, where it allows for, like you said, that exponential growth. And now we have a good structure underneath of it.
Yeah, and I think credit to you and a lot of our therapists, which is having that growth mindset of saying, hey, there's something bigger on the other side of this, and the patience to kind of see it through and being part of the solution versus being like, screw this crap.
Right.
And so I think that has gotten us to a good place. I also hope a couple years down the road, we're going to look back and be like, man, we're so much better off than we were then. Hopefully, because we just continue to kind of grow and have that mindset. So let's jump backwards a little bit towards your residency, because now you, Andrew Livington, are starting to get back into the world of education, mentorship. You're starting up a sports residency within True Sports in collaboration with some other entities. So tell us a little bit about what you gained from your residency experience, and maybe what you would have liked to have seen more of.
Yeah, I had a really great opportunity to be in St. Francis University's sports residency program. Back then, it was on campus, so I got to do probably 35 to 40 hours a week in the clinic treating, and it was on campus, so a lot of their athletes, as well as some Gen Pop. And then the rest of the time I spent either doing research, which was part of the residency, teaching in their PT program, and on the sideline with their Division I sports. So I got a really broad experience with doing a lot of different things. I loved that for where I needed to be in my career. I wasn't ready to treat sports coming out of PT school, and I knew that full well. And so what it did for me...
How'd you know that?
Because I went to Exos. I had a rotation at Exos, and I walked in the door and had no idea what I was doing. And people were talking about things that I didn't understand. And
Like what?
Plyometrics and
You're like, what's a plyometric?
right. What's a plyometric? What do you do with an ACL who's outside of 4 months? How do I progress them off of a banded TKE, and how do I progress them off a long arc quad?
Yeah.
And you have this when I was at Exos, this was great. I had great mentors there, great staff, great performance coaches who I learned a lot from. And when I started having a lot more independence there, and I had this really high level guy, and he's like, okay, what's next? And I'm like, I don't know. And so those 8 weeks there really opened up my eyes to understanding that I need more than what I had now. And I was only going to get that with residency in my mind. I had a few mentors, but I needed to go through that in my mind to be where I wanted to be. And through that, I thought, and this is where I think some people fall into the trap of, and not to talk down upon people who do this, because I think it's, if you have the right reasons, it makes sense. I thought at the end of residency, I was going to have all the answers. I quickly found out that I left residency with probably more questions than answers. But I think as a clinician in a profession, you'll always have that. You're always looking to find the next answer, knowing that you'll always have more at the other end of that. And so for me, I left residency with, in my mind, a better idea of how to find answers I was looking for, know where those resources could be, and if I didn't have them, I could find them. And so that's what, in my mind, for me, what residency did was it prepped me for the next step. Even if I wasn't fully ready or knew everything that I wanted to know, I could get there. And for me, I wanted to get my board certification, almost just more for me than almost anything else, and open doors later on for potentially teaching and different avenues like that.
Crazy to think that you don't get into graduate school first go, right? You don't get into or you weren't necessarily prepared for sports world, so you kind of go the residency route. It just seems like the barriers to entry aren't necessarily predictive or indicative of the clinician you're going to be.
100%. 100%. Which is why when young clinicians and people who want to do PT ask me about it, I'm super passionate about, look, I wasn't strong on paper. My GPA wasn't great, but I would do anything to get to what I had to do. I think that's a big difference on looking over resumes versus like getting into an interview. I knew that if I got to an interview, I would probably get the role or the position.
How do you convey that? How do you convey it on paper? How do you convey it in an interview?
I think on paper, I never figured it out, but because once I got, like I said, if I could get an interview, I was okay. In person, I feel like, I just connect with a lot of people. I don't know what it is. Not necessarily on a deeper level or anything, but I'm motivated. Like for me, I want to do a good job for me, the patient, and everybody around me. I'm much more of a team player than I am for myself necessarily. So I think people like that.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was way easier to get the role in an interview than hand my resume and I had a 3.4 GPA.
Right. I mean, I'm the guy who interviewed you, so I can definitely attest to that. And then watching you once you join the clinic, I think you're never one to jump to yeah, I know that.
Right.
And always willing to help out, cover without your hand out, right? It's always, what do I need to do for the team? And I think that's made you a great leader too. I know those who report to you now would definitely attest to that. Like they see your grind, and now they're going to hear your financial grind on this pod if they ever listen to it, which is insane. But I think that does go a long way. So it's just worth noting, man. Like really, the great surgeons that I have met time and again, not all of them, they didn't get into med school the first time around. It's crazy.
That's insane.
It's insane, and they're studs. And I see that a lot with in the PT world also. It's not a given.
Sure.
But it does happen. So I think it's like, don't be discouraged. They're just not testing the right things.
100%. And that's the difference between academia and the reality of the real world is just, it's not always going to show you what makes the most sense.
Yeah. And so watching you kind of come along this journey. What year did you start here at True Sports?
It was summer of 2019.
2019. So you've been here 4 years.
Yep, 4 years.
And so I've gotten to see you add, number one, when you first came in, I remember clinically, I think you were sound, you were rational. I remember giving you feedback like, dude, like, don't get too fancy, right? Like kill the basics first. And like we had that conversation like once, and then you started doing it, which is great. But then you started adding all this stuff that is not covered in grad school. The hiring, the mentoring, the reading a P&L, the understanding the business side of things. And that's been super impressive. So I want to dig into that. You've made some really good decisions of therapists that you have brought on underneath you. What is it in those interviews that you're looking for to predict this person's going to be an awesome teammate?
Yeah, I think early on when it was just one clinic that I was in, I looked for someone that could complement what I couldn't do. And so I think that early on is how I built a really good team around what we were doing. As we start to scale and I'm looking for different people in different roles, I'm still looking for some of the same things that I think I looked for myself as I was interviewing. Passion, number one. If you're not motivated to be here, I can't want it for you. Is it something that is it a teachable thing, or is it a non-teachable thing? I think I can teach you whatever you want to learn from an academic standpoint, but if it's a social skill, that's a little bit harder to teach. If it's a motivation thing, that's hard to teach unless I can figure out what you're motivated by. Those are honestly some of the biggest things that I look for. And then if you're from Lebanon Valley, you get some bonus points.
We got a lot of Lebanon Valley. It's crazy. I think you're right. I don't know where you got that, but I know I have struggled with clinicians or hires that I've made where I just felt like I wanted it more than them, and that's just that is a massive hurdle to overcome. You're not going to overcome it.
Right.
I don't think.
And I skim resumes just to see some background and like start conversation points, but I almost get too hyped up over resumes because of the highlights. And then if I talk to someone, I'm just almost disappointed because it's not what I thought they were going to be energy wise. And I did that for a while, like when we were in White Marsh and I was looking for the right person at times. And I interviewed 10 or 12 people and none of them just made sense to me. I think it's because I looked
How
really
many
hard.
of those did we hire?
None.
Okay, good.
None.
Okay.
And it was because I looked so hard at the resume and I was so impressed by the resume, and then I talked to them and they were just duds on the phone and it didn't make sense. And so I was then in a negative mindset about that person. So I look a little bit now, but I want them to tell me about it as I'm like reading through it as I have it up on my computer and I'm on the phone with them or on a Zoom.
What do you have to see to call them back on paper?
A DPT degree.
That's it. Do you care where they went to school?
Not really, no. Because I don't. I don't care where they went to school. Sure, the CSCS is nice. I think there's validity in that. But I've met CSCSs that weren't impressive. I like to see sports backgrounds just because it gives you an idea of what the athletes that we're treating go through. I think to be able to relate to that helps you, helps them, helps everybody, and makes that process easier.
Sure.
But again, we have some therapists that haven't played team sport. Not a lot of them, but we have some therapists that haven't played team sports growing up, but they can relate so well with the patient in front of them and have the wherewithal to ask them, hey, what is it that you do that I need to help you do better to get back to your sport? And I think if you can have someone, again, it's a soft skill. I think if you have someone that can do that, it doesn't really matter what their background was at that point.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's like, do they have feel? And you don't know that until they're on the phone. And I think it takes a while to get over the credential obsession, especially
100%.
for a dude who works so hard for his SCS. Like, you got to imagine, I have to imagine that you're looking at a thing like, okay, they got to have ATC, they got to have something, CSCS, something. It's just not the case, man. There's so many clinicians that we have that don't necessarily have that are absolute rock stars.
Yeah. Yep.
And so I would encourage, let me just think about like how I would frame this to those listening, is you need to relay your level of passion upon application, because you only get that first glance, right? That first glance of an email. So how would someone do that? I'm thinking cover letter, even though I've actually been reading like newer grads are like cover letters are antiquated. I just think it's an awesome ability to shine and show that you're different, like to have your personality come through, or also maybe there's something that doesn't show up in a line item, like as a highlight, a career highlight, as a cert. That would go a long way. I think there's room there, and if it's not a cover letter, then it's got to be a resume. I hate when I just get resumes.
I don't, because it's just I'm not a great writer.
But there
either.
might be more.
There might be more. That's why I'm always doing phone calls, and then I like to have people in person, but that takes a lot of time. But if you want to find the right person, you got to do that, I think. I love a follow-up email.
Yes,
like a
fair.
thank you follow-up email or a call or a text or something like that, just because it shows that it's on their mind, they care, they want to hear back from you. I've had plenty where I end a call or I end a in-person interview, and I never hear from that person again.
Yep.
And I, maybe it's on me. Maybe I need to send more follow-ups for good, bad, or indifferent. But that means a lot to me too.
Yeah. I mean, I listen, I've gotten that. I've also gotten follow-up emails where my name is spelled wrong, or I'll get crazy questions like, how long have you been working at True Sports, or how do you like working at True Sports, addressed to me. So I do my best to kind of hide my role within the company, but still, dude, like, do a little bit of work and realize your role in the company. Also, even if I'm just a regional director, I'm pretty happy. Like, and I'm interviewing you. So the point is being able to learn from people and all their levels of communication during the interview process. A, it all matters. B, it gives us insight as to their professionalism and really their vigor and excitement to be a part of it.
100%.
What are some other questions that you ask within that interview process?
One thing that I ask both for residency and for just the straight job as a staff PT or clinic director is, what's your rationale for wanting to do it? Especially for residency, you don't want it to be something where you feel like you should do it. Whatever your reasoning is, that's fine, but it's a commitment from a financial standpoint and from an effort standpoint. It's a grind to be in residency. So to do it because you feel like you have to is different than I'm doing it because I want to be a board certified specialist. That's awesome. That makes sense. If you're doing it because your buddy did it and now he works for a pro team, maybe that's not the best way to go about it. Maybe it's leveraging that connection versus going to residency. Maybe you're a better clinician than he was and he needed residency. Just understanding your why of what you're doing it from a residency standpoint, and then same thing, flipping it back to just as a staff PT. Why do you want this job? Is it you love working with athletes? Is it the one-on-one? Is it you plan on being here for a year and then moving on after that? Let me know what your motivation is for that. That helps everyone down the road, you, us, the entire team. Yeah,
for sure. I love hearing about not just here's why I went to residency, but here's why I chose this residency. I know that at Methodist I was going to work with Astros. I love baseball. I love shoulder mechanics. That's why I chose that versus, I wanted the SCS. I wanted to prepare for my SCS. I didn't think I was ready. Stuff like that, because I know local sports, quote unquote, residencies, you're not with athletes and you're not working with high level athletes, or you're not in a training room. And I have a hard time believing that was your first choice for sports residency if your goal was to treat high-level athletes. So don't tell me that you working at the high school is helping you treat these elite-level athletes. Do your homework. I think there's a lot there that you can glean. The way you manage, so now you're a regional director, so you're managing a whole bunch of physical therapists. You are prospecting and looking for areas of growth. You are developing relationships to increase referrals inside of those clinics. You're also pretty financially astute. You also do a good job of staying fit and healthy. And my question to you is, how do you manage all these things?
That's a great question. One day at a time. No, I think it ebbs and flows. There are weeks where I get to the gym once or twice. There are weeks where I'm at the gym 4 or 5 days a week. Same with, keeping up with Con Eds. There are a few months where I'm not really into a whole lot of newer information. And then there are a few months where I'm really diving into different research and really participating in our journal club and things like that. So it's definitely an ebb and flow, and I don't have by no means perfected that, but I think that's where I live as semi-type B, type A. I think I'm becoming more type A.
Yeah, but
for better or for worse.
Yeah, but I do feel like you do a good job of kind of dancing back and forth. Any mental health practices or meditation? What do you do to keep your mind right?
Exercise for me has been that way. It's kind of like an escape. That's why I don't work out in the clinics that I usually treat in, just because it's such a mental place where I still have to be working to a degree. I'm always thinking about it. So I try to work out in places that I don't work in necessarily, just to help get that separation. But exercise for me is a big piece of it. And then sleep. Weirdly enough, like I can sleep pretty well, which is surprising at times.
That's amazing. That's amazing that you can do that. What's your secret there?
Shut off. I don't know. I've always been a good sleeper. I don't know.
What a blessing, man. That is a blessing I don't have. That's amazing. Okay. So keeping up, like you've proven this financial literacy.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of resources can you recommend to achieve that?
I have a list of some of the ones that I used early on. Bigger Pockets, Real Estate, How to Money was a great one.
These are books or pods?
These are podcasts, and I'm scrolling through my library now. The Stacking Benjamin Show. It's a lot of just like common sense stuff that I didn't know. And then after doing some of these things for a few years, it makes a lot of sense. I got a financial advisor.
Hell yeah.
That was a big help for me. I remember the first day we met, he was like, "Hey, do you have X, Y, and Z in place?" And I'm like, "Nope."
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "All right, well, before we can really even do anything, you got to have X amount of dollars here, a Y amount of dollars here, and a backup, like a safety net, essentially." Mm-hmm. So those were some of the big things early on financially that helped me just get established, that I didn't know about. And I think for me, it seemed like everyone else knew these things, and I had no clue. So I don't know. I feel like I'm back on par with a lot of people. Maybe I'm not. I think it's different for everybody, and everyone's baseline is a little bit different. But I'm always trying to learn more about what should I be doing if I want to do this. If this is my goal, how do I set myself up to be able to do those things in 5 to 10 years?
How did you find your advisor?
Actually, he's the advisor of a buddy of mine who's also a PT. This guy deals with a lot of PTs.
Oh, cool.
So, and he deals with a lot of PTs that are in PA and Maryland. So, and because I'm now in both, it makes a lot of sense to take advantage of different tax things and things of that nature.
Anytime I mention the idea of having a financial advisor, everyone's like, "Duh, I don't want to pay for that." So how do you kind of cross that bridge, and how do you pay for it?
So I have a really good one of my best friends. He's really good with money. He's in industrial real estate. Does really well for himself. And him and I talked for a long time about me just doing it myself. And I learned a lot, but I won't get into too much detail about what it was. But then I was talking to my now financial advisor about something very specific, and he said, "Well, did you know that you can do this to avoid the taxes on X, Y, and Z, or make it legitimate?" And I'm like, "Nope." So now, like, you just sold me on you're my guy.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know what I didn't know.
Sure.
And he's been doing it for a long time. He doesn't get freaked out with different trends. He knows what works, and to stick. He's kind of my opposite. I always tell people he's my opposite of, I want to be aggressive, and he is very much like, I hear you. I'll let you be aggressive with this, but 85% of everything else we're going to be conservative with because we know it works.
Yeah. How do you pay him?
I believe he gets a percentage of what I generate over the course of the year. So it's a fee.
Okay. He gets a piece of profits?
Yes.
What if you guys lose, God forbid?
That's a great question. I need to ask more of those questions.
Okay. Yeah. Ask those questions. I know it kind of runs the gamut. A lot of advisors will charge a given percentage of what they manage.
Right.
Period. Right. So it still incentivizes them to win, whatever that means, because they get a percentage. Usually that percentage is in different buckets. The more they manage, the less percentage. It's kind of like agents and draft picks. Like the higher draft picks give their agent a lesser percentage.
Right.
So standardly you look to be in that 1% and below.
Right.
As a fee. So just think about that. But then they're also, and I have this conversation a lot. how worthwhile it is to have a planner, not necessarily take that percentage of whatever it is he's managing, but if you don't necessarily have the money, so you're not going to be investing actively with him, to just pay for a plan. And that's the first thing that you kind of had, which you mentioned, which was you got to put money here, got to put money there. Here's how you get safe. Here's where you could be risky. A lot of advisors will sell that plan.
Right.
And I would highly advise it. Same time, I have a buddy who's a dentist who laughs at me for paying the percentage because he's like, why don't you just manage it yourself? I said, because I work more than 4 days a week. You don't, because you're a dentist, because his margins are way better. So the point is he has time to dive in. I really don't. I wouldn't be able to sleep if I was doing my own finances. So, okay, if that's where you get some financial information, and thanks for those resources, talk to me clinically. Where do you go to get smarter?
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, I'm surrounded by a lot of PTs that are really hungry for information. So I get a lot of it from just being in the clinics with them, whether it's different styles of treating, different methods here and there. JOSPT is a great resource that I get pretty frequently different papers from. Like, again, I'm fortunate enough to have the ability to read those pretty well, thanks to residency, in my opinion. I wouldn't be able to read that before residency. I just don't understand a lot of that verbiage a lot of times if I was coming straight out of school.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of podcasts I listen to. Best PT podcast. What else do I have here? Strong by Science is a good one. The Mike Reynolds Show is great. I know he's another one that he has now. I can't think of the name of it.
I think it's
the Sports PT podcast.
Yeah,
it was.
Yeah. Not to be confused with True Sports.
Exactly. And honestly, with being in the residency world, just being so close to the academia side of things, you're still getting whispers of all those from students of like, hey, what do you think about this? And I have time to dive into those papers. So it's coming from a lot of different places. I think that's how it should be. I think it should be from physicians. It should be from PTs. It should be from all these different outlets, because in the grand scheme of things, your treatment method is a combination of all those things too. And if the patient doesn't buy into what that is, none of it matters. So I think meeting the patient where they are based off of your experience and the things that you're learning are an art that eventually you kind of figure out how to do.
Yeah, it's just an art, and you get better. And you're gonna make mistakes.
Yep.
But having that humility and growth mindset around it, to kind of bounce back. You ready for a lightning round?
Oh boy, no, but let's do it. Let's do it.
What sport has the best athletes? It's not a hard one.
It is because I think there's two answers to this. There's an all around great athlete, and there's an athlete who's great at what they do. Right? Like, I think some of the best athletes are lacrosse players, and I hate to admit that now, but being in Maryland, a lot of them move really well.
Okay.
At the same time, if you look at a defensive end, they're pretty athletic in the NFL now. They're 6'5", they're 300 pounds, they run 4.6s, but they can't shoot a lacrosse stick.
We don't know that.
That's true. So I think I'm gonna say probably an outside linebacker.
That's neither of the two you
I
mentioned.
know it's not, but as I thought about it more, I'm gonna say outside linebacker.
Why?
They have to cover in space, and they're also in the trenches at times too, depending on the defense that you're running.
Okay, here's my counterpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Athlete isn't just bigger, faster, stronger. It's also coordination. Now, is there some of that there? Yes. But to your point with the shooting the lacrosse ball, not a stick, there's far more dexterity. There's far more fine motor skill in something like that. There is no fine motor in outside linebacking.
That's not true.
Come on, tell me what it is.
Hand
What's
placement.
the fine? Get out of here, dude.
Placement.
Yeah, I've heard this argument, but that's still gross motor. You're
Fair.
punching.
Fair.
You're striking.
Fair.
As my linebackers teach me, I think. Just keep that in mind. That's why the right answer to this question is, I think it's the NBA shooting guard.
Really?
Big, long, rangy, offense, defense, reactionary, fine motor skills, gross motor skills, got to be springy, court vision, know-how.
I like that answer.
Thank you.
I would disagree, though.
Yeah, but okay. but you haven't said why.
I
Who's better?
there's so many
What can't they do?
subjectives. There's so
What
many
can't they do?
subjectives. There's no contact involved. I shouldn't say that. There is not as much contact involved as other sports. I think you talk about motor control and strength. I think
Yes.
there's less of it that gets in that's relevant to that. I at that point looking at martial artists,
Okay.
grapplers, intrinsic hand placement, again, maybe not as fine dexterity wise as shooting a lacrosse ball on
Yeah.
a stick.
Very good.
I mean, conditioning is fantastic. Mixture of contact, strength, footwork, movement.
The okay, I hear that. The only thing is that another point to your point or support of your point would be, have you ever seen an elite level shooting guard squat? They can't move.
No.
They're so
I know
stiff, and it's because they're so goddamn springy.
Right.
But that would be the knock.
That would be the
Not the contact or the strength.
What
Those
was your
guys are
question?
giants.
What was your question?
Best athlete.
What's your term for athlete? Is it someone
I
who's
think
good
it's
at
fine
everything?
and gross. Yes, fine motor skills, gross motor skills. And that's a great combination.
It is.
I mean the really high level. I think long poles.
Yeah.
I mean they're big, they're fast, they can hit.
Yep.
And to have, I guess, the proprioception to know where the head is on top of that stick. It's so far away
Right.
from them to just throw it up in the air and just know where it is. Some of them score. Like, that's pretty
I
impressive.
could get on board with that.
There just aren't that many. There aren't that many of
Right.
them.
Right.
And we live in Maryland, so I think it's just like this silo. No one else plays lacrosse.
True.
Definitely not in Long Island. Okay. That was question 1. There you go.
That was lightning?
That was lightning fast. Yeah, that's my level of athleticism. From a PT perspective, what is the biggest misconception of outpatient physical therapy?
I think the biggest misconception is that you need heat, ice, and stim.
I freaking hate that.
There's just not skilled care, and I think it takes away from what we do. I think it dampens the profession, and you're seeing. I think it dampens the profession. This is a bigger topic, in my opinion, and you're seeing strength coaches start moving into this realm of injury prevention and addressing injuries. And so it's like, if we're not advancing and we're still doing heat, ice, and stim like we did in the 80s and 90s, what's our profession doing? Insurance isn't paying for it as much anymore, if at all.
Right.
And they can do it at home.
Do you think it is the conception of, let's say, applicants or new grads that is a part? Like, have we broken that stigma yet or no?
We as true sports?
Yeah, we as sports PTs or PTs.
Yeah, I think in the world that we're starting to live in, yes.
Yeah.
There are some patients that are like, hey, where's heat, ice, and stim? But I'm getting less
That's
of that.
patience, yeah.
And same with PTs. Like, I used to get, well, where's the
You're right.
the ice? And where's the heat?
Yep.
I'm like, well, we don't have that here. And I'm
Yep.
not getting that anymore. So I think people are either A, doing their homework more, or B, understanding that that's not part of what really we're doing in this world anymore.
Yeah.
In the sports realm, at least.
Yeah. I also think maybe a close second would be that it's impossible to find a place that does one-on-one
It's very hard.
and is in network, right? So
Yep.
so I think that is a misconception. Like,
Yep.
they are out there. You just got to search. It is doable and still being in network. I just had a great conversation with Danny Mattei, who's a consultant, a business consultant for cash PTs. Dude couldn't believe that we treat one-on-one for 45. He couldn't believe it. He's like, yeah, that's a problem for a cash
Right.
PT. But we are out there. Like, constructs like us are out there. We just have to finesse it a little bit. We have to like figure out how do we afford the facilities and the talent. And
Yep.
like figuring that out and finding talent that cares more about quality of care, more about time with their patient than necessarily every single goddamn dollar. But, we're here trying to create both. Next, what are you reading?
I just finished Gary V's 12 and a half.
Ooh, good.
It was very good, yeah.
Because?
It was really introspective on a guy who's a big name in the business and like media world. And I appreciate that. And it was easy for me to apply what he was talking about in this book to what I do on a day-to-day basis when it comes to like managing people and working
Give me
with people.
one example of what you took away and added to your management style.
So the book's called 12 and a half, and he talks about these 13 traits that are required to, in his mind, be a good leader. And the half is the one that he's not good at. And so through the different traits, he talks about how why he thinks it's important, and then why he thinks and how he uses it. And just for me, I think some of the things that he's good at, I'm not great at, and vice versa. So to hear someone say why they're good at what you're not good at just helps me figure out how to be better with the trait that I don't feel like I'm great at.
What are you not good at?
I'm not great with, I'll be very upfront, confrontation. I don't like confrontation. I think for me, I try to be, I'm a servant leader. And so that's like that's my negative, is like, I can't do something for someone. Basically with the book, it's good to see how someone else addresses their weaknesses, and you can see maybe that you're good at that and how they handle not being good at something else, to get ideas on how to become better at the traits that you're.
Because Gary Vee is good at a lot of freaking things.
He is.
What'd he say he's bad at? You don't remember?
There was one word, I can't remember what the trait was. Was it tact? I think it wasn't tact. I forget what the word was, but no. But he went into detail on like why he feels the way he feels about that, how he handles that, how he acknowledges that he's not good at this trait, and he's upfront about it.
That is pretty amazing. To such a overachiever, to have the wherewithal and even the humility to come out with something like that and just say, hey, I'm not perfect at everything. I think, I wonder if he would have done that 10 years ago or so. He has just been hard charging forever.
A while now.
Forever, yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And the heights that he's reached. So you did pretty good there with the lightning round, despite all of our tech difficulties. Yeah.
Sweating.
Okay, so tell the audience of Sports PTs how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, so you can get a hold of me on Instagram. I have a really long handle. It's Andrew J. Livington PT on Instagram. That's really the biggest platform I'm on. I want to get into TikTok now, but I'm holding off on it for now. That's the best way to get a hold of me, is on Instagram. Again, Andrew J. Livington PT. That's really it.
Where can they send you a resume? Give them an email.
Resume, my email is andrew@truesportspt.com. Feel free to send me a resume there, or just even email me the chat. Always looking forward to it.
Watching kind of your evolution through your career thus far has been awesome to see. You've taught me a ton, both from the financial literacy standpoint as well as the clinical standpoint, what it's like going through residency. And what I've gained most, both from this conversation and just working with you in general, is your ability to just stay even. It's awesome. And it's something that I strive to kind of put in my arsenal, because that is not my nature, but I'm trying to learn from you. And that's just that really did come across in today's conversation. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for staying even, because like the sky was falling in during this podcast and you're just like chill during the whole thing. A testament to who you are. It's a great skill. So thanks for everything you have brought to True Sports. Thanks for making yourself available. Thanks to everyone who listened. Hopefully you gained something. Let us know what you loved. Let us know what you want us to improve. You can always reach me, Yoni, YONI, at truesportspt.com. I want to see your resumes, but I also want feedback on today's episode and what you want to hear more of. Thanks so much for listening, guys. Bye-bye.